All right, so here we are. I'm really excited today to be starting this conversation around telekinesis. And for those of you who are kind of like, in our circle of things that we tend to do at the Neuromeditation Institute, this is going to seem like a little bit of a variance. Like, where are we going here? What's going on? This is Jeff's talking about crazy stuff now. But am I? Am I talking about crazy stuff? I don't think so. I think that there's science behind this, whether we understand it or not, is my sort of theory about this. And so one of the things that I've been interested in doing is meeting, talking to, learning from people who have these skills and have been developing these things for a long time, not just with telekinesis, but other things. But today, our guest, that's his deal. That's his specialty. And so I'm going to let Robert introduce himself, and then we'll have plenty of time to kind of chat and ask some questions.
Absolutely. Yeah. My name is Robert Allen, and I am from Missouri. And I've been messing around with telekinesis since about March of 2011. I'm also known as Trebor 7. That's Robert spelled backwards and the letter number 7 spelled out in letters on YouTube. I've been doing that since about 2013. And I've had the privilege of helping thousands, possibly tens of thousands of people discover their telekinetic abilities or other psychic abilities just via YouTube videos and some online interaction through Skype and whatnot. And it's just become sort of a passion of mine to help people discover their abilities.
You've got a lot of videos. How many videos do you have now at last count?
Somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 videos, I think.
You just keep kind of cranking them out. So, which is impressive because, I first saw your videos, probably 8 years ago now. I bet it's been that long.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah. Since 2013.
At least 6, maybe 7 or 8. And yeah, it looks like you've just kind of continually been sort of like putting out good content. So
I've taken a few hiatuses in there, few distractions here and there, but I try to keep the uploads frequent enough just to keep people interested in things.
Yep.
But the tutorials, I learned, let's go back to the beginning. In 2010 is when I discovered the powers of meditation, and I started getting into Qigong and stretching and breathing exercises. And the following year, 2011, about springtime again, stumbled onto a video of a person spinning a psi wheel, which is basically foil or paper on a needle, by cupping their hands around it. And then after about 6 weeks of messing with that, I discovered I could do it without my hands, so I could get rid of that, it's the heat from your hands theory that everybody gets stuck on. And then I dabbled in it for, almost 2 years. About a year and a half before I told anybody about it. And then I shared it with my family, and I taught my youngest daughter to turn a psi wheel and my son to turn a psi wheel. And I thought, hey, there's other people out there that want to know this. So I made some tutorials, posted it on YouTube, and the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah. So what was it that, so obviously you saw somebody doing this, spinning a psi wheel, but like, why did that like grab you? Like, what was it about that you're like, I want to do that?
Well, the thing was, after doing some Qigong and meditation, I was feeling subtle energy. Like I could feel energy between my palms, and I could sense things without seeing them, like something would start to fall in it. And I was just starting to get these, I wanted to find a use for this external sensation that I was getting. And I think the search phrase was chi exercise or chi uses for chi or something like that. And as soon as I saw the psi wheel, like, oh yeah. So I stumbled onto it. It wasn't like I was, looking for telekinesis. It just kind of found me when you know how it is, when you get your energy ramped up and your brain waves slowed down, you can kind of do things that you can't normally do in your normal state of mind.
Uh-huh. And so that leads me to one of the questions that I've thought about, because, I've looked at some other people who, are engaged in similar things, right? Like I'm sure you've seen Carolyn Corey's work and her documentary that she came out with a few years ago. I forget what it's called, Supernatural. No, is that what's called, Supernatural? No, I can't think of what it is. Anyway, she's got kind of a telekinesis kind of aspect to what she does and what she showed in this documentary. And so she's got her own kind of angle and approach. So one of the questions that I had was, do you feel like the ability to move things with your mind, or, and it's not even just moving things, right? Because I've also seen you like snuff out matches and things like that, right? So, do you feel like that is actually sort of this energy, this sort of like chi energy that you're moving, or does it feel like it's mental and you're using your hands to kind of help that feeling? Or is it?
I think it's a 3-part thing. I have a little recipe. I call it empathy, mindset, and energy. And my strategy is I'll do energy work to get my internal energy all ramped up. I'm a pretty big fan of transcendental meditation after that, just to get the mind cleared and slowed down. I also do, it's called microcosmic breathing. That really gets things cranked up. I even mess with the Wim Hof. Have you heard of him? The Iceman.
Yeah.
I mess with that. That'll get that'll make you dizzy and stuff too, but that will really ramp your chi up. So I would get this internal energy all ramped up and then slow my brain waves way down. And then I would just use empathy with the target to make the connection. And the rest of it just seems autonomic almost. Or automatic. It doesn't seem like I'm actually doing it. I'm not fully in control. I mean, I am to some degree, but it still to this day often feels accidental. But it's not. I hear a lot of people describe telekinesis as moving things with your mind, but I think the mind is just a small part of it, or an important part of it, a third of it, like empathy, mindset, energy. But not until I get everything balanced and stuff do things really start working for me. And after you exercise this, it kind of seems like a muscle that you're not used to using. It opens up other things. Like I got into the extrasensory perception, remote viewing. All these psychic abilities seem to be interconnected somehow. They're, different applications, but somehow connected with this right frame of mind, the energy ramped up, and keeping your emotions and thoughts subdued to a degree. I always tell people it works in the low beta to upper alpha range. I, of course, have no way of knowing that for certain.
We can measure that.
It seems like if I'm real cognate and I'm using my bifocal vision and all that stuff, nothing's going to happen. It does have something to do with your energy, your mindset, and your emotions.
So it sounds like when you're talking about kind of the right mindset, it sounds like part of that, if you're talking about like transcendental meditation, is kind of clearing out a lot of the clutter of kind of day-to-day thought, right? Like you're not engaging in thoughts about yourself and your day and your work and all that stuff. You're trying to kind of like move out of your awareness for the moment.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. When I'm doing telekinesis, time and space and all that stuff just seems to disappear. It's kind of a sacred time. I tell people I feel closest to God when I'm doing telekinesis because there's no me. It's just like a universal mindset type thing. Everything is connected, this unity, it doesn't really matter. But as soon as I throw thoughts and ego and emotions and stuff into it, it all just kind of crumbles.
So then it doesn't work.
Right. Yeah. And that's why I have a hard time doing it in front of strangers or on demand or put on the spot or, things like that, because my emotions, and I'm a feeler. I'm a very sensitive guy anyway. So if there's skeptics nearby or, somebody that's too anxious for me to do it or all these things come into play. So it's really kind of a solo sacred thing that I do. I have had the opportunity to do it a few times in front of people, and I get mixed reactions. I get doubt, I get fear, I get a lot of questions, but it affects people differently. But I think it's something you need to experience in a solo situation and just become accustomed to it. And it does feel natural. I think it's something, I don't think we actually remember. We don't actually learn telekinesis. It's more like we remember it. How we have our, I'm trying to think, autonomic system, I think that's what it's called, that runs like our breathing and our heart.
Yep.
Okay. It's kind of like that, and not so much the sympathetic part of it, the fear and flight and all that part of it, but more of the nervous system on the inside where things just do things intuitively. I can anyway, raise and lower my heartbeat, do different things affecting your body. And I think it's connected somehow with that portion of our abilities, just a natural ability, innate ability that's already there.
So it's more like kind of either just remembering how to connect that way. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's interesting because, so you talked about the mindset and, kind of using meditation and, learning how to kind of like quiet down all that noise. So in our system, we kind of have 5 different styles of meditation. And so that would kind of fall in our category of quiet mind, which is one of the styles, right? Of where you're sort of like, trying to kind of tap into this spaciousness. You could call it emptiness, but I like spaciousness. So the other part that you brought up was kind of ramping up your energy, which is interesting because I could imagine some people might hear those as contradictory.
It does seem that way. Yeah. But I'm sure, you've done Qigong and things, that feeling, almost like a buzzing feeling, internal buzzing, where it feels like or it does for me. I can't speak for everyone, but I feel like if you took your hands and rubbed them together for a real long time and you stopped, how that sensation is still there. Well, it's like that, but internally. And I can just do energy work until I feel I've got my fuel up, is the way I always talk to myself and my self-talk. I'm all fueled up. And then all I have to do is just slow that mind down so I can let that energy project beyond my body, so to speak.
Would it be fair to describe that feeling as like an internal energy vibration?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, yeah. Very much so. Yeah, my whole body is kind of tingling and humming on the inside. It's hard to describe, but
again, we've both done Qigong. And so, it's like that kind of sensation, of course, sometimes they just describe it as a chi sensation, right? Which is like, well, what's that? Right. But some people experience it as like getting cold or getting hot or like electricity or like, like these different kinds of words that people use. And so it seems like people experience it somewhat differently too, that maybe not everybody will feel it the same way you feel it.
Yeah, and I've found that just speaking with other people, not everyone feels the same sensation. And I'm not saying this is the only way to do telekinesis. I always tell people, this is my way. It's not the way. It's just what I found out that works,
And actually that's another really interesting thing I wanted to bring up because, there are different people that have different kinds of opinions, right? About, or different strategies for how to kind of engage with this. And, you've obviously found a strategy that works really well for you. And so I'm curious because you've been teaching other people. And so have you found that in general, if people kind of apply the things that you've come up with, that it seems to work for them?
Yeah, in general, definitely. Yeah, not specifically for every single person. But a lot of people will absorb all the information and not, apply anything. They're like, oh, well, I didn't do the energy work, but I did the meditation. They just do a part of it, but people who have really dedicated, I have private tutorials on Trebor7.com as well. And the people usually willing to spend a few bucks to enter the private lessons are the same people who are willing to put in the hours of learning how to do some yoga or meditation and Qigong and maybe change your diet. I think diet has a little bit to do with it too. Toxicity, all these things, the better your body is running, functioning properly, and, good diet of raw food with lots of chi in it, those type of things all help. So those people who really apply all the things on for 6 weeks or more, yes, they almost always see results.
So that's interesting. So there's a couple of things I want to kind of ask you about in that regard. So the first thing is, you even mentioned it when you were kind of introducing your background with this and how you got started, that, it takes time. And you just mentioned it again, right? Like you got to put in some practice for weeks before you might get anything to happen.
Very much like muscle training. You can't work out for a few hours and expect to see your biceps growing. It's sort of like awakening a portion of your being. I don't want to say mind because it doesn't all happen in the mind. I think the chakras are involved and everything else. but you awaken it and stimulate it daily, and it will start to grow and get stronger. And pretty soon it's strong enough to do something small, like move a piece of paper. It's a lot of work and time just to get it started.
Would you say that that's kind of a good starting place for people, is like the pinwheel?
Yeah, the psi wheel. I putting it on a needle with the least amount of resistance, keep it close to you. In fact, that's how I taught my children, was to put the psi wheel next to their bedstand. And as you get groggy, it seems like at night it works so much better because your brain waves are starting to shut down. In fact, I used to wait for my first yawn. I'm like, oh, this would be a great time to do telekinesis. So I told my kids, I said, don't try to turn the psi wheel, but I want you, when you feel groggy and you think you're about to drift off to sleep, please just look at your psi wheel as you drift off to sleep. And one night it'll just start turning. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to make it do it. And that's how they both got started. And then they had to learn how to do it in a waking state. It's easy to do when your brain is shutting down naturally. I think that has a lot to do with it. But yeah, the psi wheel, I think, is a great place to start. And practice just your left turn and your right turn, or your yin and your yang. I did that for almost a year. I'm embarrassed to admit how much time I've spent with a psi wheel. Yeah.
And so, like, I mean, I know it's going to differ for each individual person, but I'm just anticipating what people would ask, right? Like people watching this, right? And they're going to be like, okay, cool. Like, well, how much time do I got to put in before something's going to happen, right? I mean, it's hard to imagine spending 30 minutes every day staring at a psi wheel and it just sits there, right? Like that would be pretty difficult to like stick with that.
Yeah, I don't usually make it past 10 minutes or so if things aren't moving. But if things are moving, I can get lost in it and have myself doing an hour-long session as well. What I recommend in general for people, if you've done your preparation, you've done a little bit of meditation, a little bit of energy work, you don't have a full belly or your mind's not running 1,000 miles an hour, within the first 5 minutes, you should be seeing some movement. If not, ramp up whatever you're doing, change your diet a little better, do a little more energy work, a little more, just try to troubleshoot a little bit, but do not sit there and stare at it and get disappointed with yourself and give yourself a headache and stuff. No, it should be effortless. You should not be putting a lot of effort into this. It will be effortless and accidental when it starts. It'll be like, oh, the less I try, the better it works type thing.
It's interesting because, I kind of mentioned at the beginning that, I've been kind of practicing again, and primarily with a psi wheel. And, I've gotten pretty good with that, where I can usually get it to go pretty quick, within the first minute or so.
Nice.
I can get it moving, right? I can get it kind of doing full, just spinning, right? And it's like, okay, all right, cool. And I've kind of figured out my own way to kind of connect with it. And yeah, it feels sort of easy, right? Like it's kind of automatic. Like it's not like I have to do anything, right?
Right.
And I've noticed other days where I sit down and nothing's happening, just for, I don't know what's different, but it's not doing anything, right? It's just sitting there. And it sounds like that's just part of the game, huh?
It is. It's that way with all psychic abilities. It's a hit and miss. Works one day, won't work the next. And I may be stretching it here, but I think maybe alignments with the stars, and maybe, I don't know for sure, the cycle of the moon, the position of the sun. I think maybe all these things kind of have a little bit of play in it. I can't prove any of that, but I found that too. I've done my meditation. I've done my energy work. I'm ramped up. I feel like I am in the TK mood. And sometimes I'll sit down and things just aren't working.
So let me ask you this question, right? Because I was watching one of your tutorial videos or something, and, you had the little tin foil, kind of bent in half and standing on its end. And, you were either kind of pulling it. There you go. Exactly.
One of those. Yeah.
One of those. And, have it standing on its end, and, either pull it toward you where it falls forward, or push it and it falls backward. And so I've been, trying to incorporate that and do more of that, right? Like, let's see if I can kind of change this up, right? And do something different. And there was like one time that I had some success. And other than that, it's like, I am not getting anything you know, and so that strikes me as weird, right? That it's like, okay, I can get the side wheel to move pretty easily, but then you give me this other task and nothing.
So here's the thing with your side wheel. Your left and right turn, that is teaching your push and your pull. We have to get used to using those energies with intention. And when you're pushing and pulling a standing target, you noticed in the tutorial how I taught you how to open it up to make the threshold to where it's just almost ready to fall over on its own. That gives it about the same resistance as a needle touching it. So that's a good step. If you're not having any luck pushing or pulling, you may just try to open that up and make your target a little easier to move. But yeah, that's definitely a huge step in the right direction. Pushing, pulling, and then the next step will be rolling things. But yeah, you're on the right track. That's a good idea, right. Moving from the side wheel right to the push pull.
So what would you say is the coolest thing you've been able to do?
Help other people heal themselves.
Oh, well, that's a great answer. I meant like, what kind of cool thing could you move around or do?
So here's the biggest thing I ever influenced, and I can't, I try not to speak of things I don't have on video. There was a storm out in the woods. I have a little 10-acre farm, and there's a tree that fell and was teetered. It was up there quite a way. A limb had fallen, and it was teetering just a little bit, here and there. And I wanted it down bad because I didn't want it was over the trail. I didn't want it to fall on people. So I stopped. I did a little bit of, breathing exercises. I meditated a little bit, and I started moving it until it fell off. And I think that was probably the coolest thing. There was no witnesses. I can't prove that I did this, but it was neat. It was practical. It was something I needed done. I didn't have to climb the tree. I used my psychic abilities to do something practical. But I've done a lot of cool stuff. Yeah. And I try not to mention anything that I don't have on video. The coolest thing that we have on video, we used to, not so much anymore, but every Sunday I used to meet with a group of fellow practitioners, and they were from all over the place: Washington, Kentucky, Missouri, California, lots of different places. And we had one guy join us from Italy, and he was dead set on us moving something at his house. And we were thinking, he was thinking a side wheel. And I'm like, well, you move the side wheel on your own. There's no way to know if that's you moving it or us moving it. Let's try to flicker your light, the light that was in view of his camera. And after about 4 or 5 minutes, it flickered a few times. Like, I was so ecstatic about that. I think that was way cool. And I do have that video on my channel. It's like a 1-minute video or something. But yeah, that was pretty neat. I think it's a miracle every time something happens. It's all fascinating to me. Seeing someone move a side wheel for the first time is super exciting for me, just like it is for the person who did it. I feel so good to see them. You finally got your energy to go on beyond your body with your own intentions, telling it what to do. I said, that's how we can change the world,
Yeah, that's super impressive, right? That you could move like something so big, right? And I, it makes me wonder, right? Like, your thoughts about this. Is it kind of like, obviously there's analogies to Star Wars and using the Force, right? And, the whole lesson that Luke has to learn, right? He's like trying to pull the thing out of the water or whatever's going on. And, and basically the lesson I got from that was that he was in his own head, right? He was thinking that he couldn't do it because it was this big object. And so it was all just psychological. Like, if he could get rid of the idea that's like, I can't do this because it's too big, then it is possible. But somehow you got to sort of get your mind around that idea that it doesn't matter. That size doesn't matter. Weight doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. If it works at all, it works on everything, you would think. But it's hard to get over that. Your mental mind knows something's heavy, therefore it's harder to move. It's really hard. That's something hard to overcome. That's why I usually just tell people to keep it simple, keep it light. If you move anything, it's a miracle.
So the one part, your three-pronged approach. We talked a little bit about, kind of the energy part and the mental part, but we haven't talked about the empathy part. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Well, this takes a lot of imagination on the empathy part of it. We start with familiarity, and I mean very familiar. Let's take the piece of foil, for example. I would spend a good 5 to 10 minutes feeling and observing this piece of foil as if I'm like a a 3D scanner and I'm going to make an exact replica of it. So I'm getting as much information about the target ingrained into my brain. Like I can close my eyes and see exactly what that foil look, every wrinkle, crinkle, where the crease is, where the center is, the look, the smell, the taste, the sound, just trying to absorb as much information about that target. And then the empathy part of it is just going to take a lot of practice and time and dedication. I think I'm better at it because I'm somewhat of an empath. I kind of feel and sense energies a little more so than maybe the average Joe. So that made it a little easier for me. But once you get your target, whatever it is, if you're spinning it, go spend some time on a merry-go-round and empathize with that feeling, of that spinning feeling, because you're really, empathy is not only feeling what other things or people are feeling, it can also mean projecting that feeling to other people or things. And that's the tool that we're using to connect with our target. So the empathy part is huge. I dedicated a whole page. I have a free website, telekinesisschool.com, and I dedicated a whole page to trying to describe this bonding, this, like I said, the extreme familiarization and these things to help people do that. Because that is one of the hugest stumbling blocks. Anybody can eat right, anybody can do energy, and anyone can slow their brain waves down. But empathizing with an inanimate object takes practice.
So beyond familiarity, it sounds like there's also some sort of a connection that you're making with the object, some sort of energetic connection.
Mm-hmm. And that's part of it. Bonding, like if you use something you carry with you all the time or something you handle a lot, that's a great TK target. A lot of my students would carry the foil they're going to work with in their back pocket all the time when they're not using it. So then when they pull it out, it feels like maybe some of your energy is in this thing already. And then it's easy to connect with yourself, So yeah, this is all theoretical, but I do have some experience to back it up that it does help people to bond with the targets to get a connection.
I was curious about visualization, if you find that to be useful, sort of imagining whatever it is that you're hoping will happen, sort of seeing it in your mind as best as you can.
I did that a lot when I first started trying to push and pull, and it didn't seem to work nearly as well as the empathy. If I would stick with the feeling, I'm sure everyone's done it, leaned back too far in a chair, and that little, you get in your tummy when you've gone beyond your balance point. I would start using that feeling, that little, when I was trying to tip things, and that little conveying that feeling was easier than trying to convince by repeatedly seeing the thing fall over, because then you start thinking too much and trying too much. So for me, it was more about the empathy. But I do have students that are very visual people, and they use visualization. And I have musicians who say they silently hum a tune or a pitch or something like that. So you can do it audibly. You can do it through your emotions. You can do it through your vision. You can do it through your mind. There's no set rule. Just keep experimenting and finding out what works for you is what I highly recommend for everyone.
And maybe that's a good place to wrap this up, right? Is that, sounds like based on what your experience and kind of what I've seen and observed from other people in different realms of psi work, is that to some degree, you got to kind of find your own path. There's some guidelines and there's some things that'll probably help, but in the end, you kind of have to figure out how you work.
It is definitely an inside job. Yeah, it's an inside job.
I love it. I think that's a perfect place for us to tie this up. So where can people, one more time, kind of find you and what you're up to?
Trebor7 on YouTube, Trebor7.com for private tutorials, and telekinesisschool.com for free tutorials. And I do offer some sacred supplements at sacredsupplements.com that tend to be side boosting related. They're all natural supplements. You don't have to buy them from me. There's tutorials to learn how to make them for yourself. But I get a lot of good results and feedbacks for people who try Ormus. So if you've never heard of Ormus, that's a whole other can of worms. Maybe we can get into someday. But for those who don't have tons of time for meditation and energy work and are kind of looking for something to boost their psi abilities, you might look at sacredsupplements.com as well. But most of my stuff is free. The YouTube channel will get you where you need to go to get your psi wheel spinning.
Awesome. I think this has been super informative, and I'm still looking forward to the day when I can get back to Missouri and get over there and hook your brain up. and see what's going on. So hopefully you're still open to doing that.
I'm as nervous as I ever was about it, but I do want to do it.
Well, if nothing happens, nothing happens. But it seems like it'd be really interesting, I think, and useful to figure out, what is changing in your sort of how your brain/mind operates when you're actually engaging in these psi abilities.
I agree. Yeah, fascinating stuff.
Cool. All right. Well, hey, Robert, it was really a joy connecting with you again. Thanks for all your time.
Thank you so much for having me.